Well, hello xenographers everywhere and welcome to another episode. And this week we're going to be taking a look at some vintage wide angles. Sometimes the 50mm focal length is just a little bit too long, and there are times when you need something wider. So today we're looking at 4 vintage lenses, 2 35mm and 2 28mm. Wide angles are often very useful in landscape photography, and they're also pretty widely used in street photography. They lend themselves well to those situations because they open up the field of view just a little bit more. There are many vintage wides that you can choose from, so I've put together 4 of my favourites, and we're going to have a look at those today. So first up, we've got the Olympus 28mm f3.5. This is a lens I've been playing around a little with recently, and I have to say I really like the results. It'll focus down to 30 centimeters, so you can get really close to your subject with this lens. It's not particularly fast at f3.5. Like all the Zuiko lenses, it's very compact. It's constructed entirely from metal, so it's very good quality. It's very well engineered. It has this nice diamond finish on the focus ring here, so it's very easy to find the focus ring when you're looking through the viewfinder. It's a very sharp lens, and one of the characteristics of a 28mm lens is that they give you very large depth of field, and they're very useful for street photography because if you set the focus to around 1 or 2 meters, pretty much everything you're going to need to be in focus is in focus. And on this lens, because the aperture only stops down to f3.5, that means it's inherently a lens with very good depth of field. I guess nobody buys a 28mm lens for the blurry background effects, but if you get close to your subject, this lens will give you some blurry background, and it's of a very nice character. Zuiko lenses are known for rendering colours nicely, and this one's no exception. You really get plenty of punch to your image with this lens. It's quite contrasty too. I wasn't too sure what to expect of this lens, but having used it quite a bit recently, I've got to say this is one I'll definitely be keeping hold of. It's a really nice lens, and although I don't use the 28mm focal length a lot, when I do need a 28, this is one that I can turn to in confidence. Here's another lens that I've been using quite a bit recently. This is the Cosina 28mm f2.8. This lens has really surprised me because it's actually capable of some very nice results indeed. It beats the Olympus by 1 stop, so it's slightly better for low light, and it's pretty much the same size. This too is a very small and compact lens. Where it loses out to the Olympus is in the quality of its construction, because while it's mostly made of metal, there are some plastic parts used, and while that's not necessarily too much of a drawback, it may not be quite as long-lived as the Zuiko, although this one seems to have come through its 40 or so years rather well. There's actually very little difference in image quality between the two, although I think the Olympus is probably slightly sharper. Having said that, this is a pretty sharp lens. It renders colours very nicely, and it's pretty contrasty as well. The aperture ring is at the back, unlike the Zuiko, which has its aperture ring at the front, which, personally, I prefer. The focus ring is at the front on this one. It has a knurled rim, so you can find it quite easily when you're looking through the viewfinder. It turns smoothly enough, and it focuses down to 30 centimeters. Where this lens does beat the Zuiko is on price. While a good Zuiko 28 f3.5 will cost between £40 to £60, a good example of the Cosina lens will cost you around about £20, perhaps even less. These lenses are not expensive, largely because they don't have the benefit of a big brand name. This one has a Praktica PK mount, but there are many Cosina lenses that have an M42 mount as well. Both are very easy to adapt to modern mirrorless cameras, and a generic so-called dumb adapter will cost around £10 or so. I do like this lens very much. It's a very nice little piece of kit, and it has a well-deserved place in my list of best vintage wide angles. Now here's a vintage lens that I like very much indeed. This is the Zuiko 35mm f2.8. This is a lens that's grown on me quite a lot, and I find myself turning to it more and more when I go out to do some street photography. It has the usual Zuiko configuration of aperture ring at the front and focus ring directly behind it. Apertures run from f16 to a useful f2.8. It has the usual Olympus knurled diamond finish on the focus ring, making it very easy to find when you're looking through the viewfinder, and it turns through about 180 degrees. Again, because this is a wide angle lens, if you set your focus to around a metre or so, much of what you need will be in focus if you're doing street photography, and if you stop down a little bit, that makes the depth of field even larger. So this lens is in its element when it comes to street photography. It's very short and compact in the Zuiko tradition, and it's very well made. It's all metal, it's very nicely engineered, and these lenses do seem to last. I've yet to find a Zuiko lens where the grease has dried out, and while that surely must happen, that hasn't been my experience, and they do seem to have used top quality materials in manufacture. This lens will focus down to about 30 centimeters, perhaps very slightly beyond that, so you can get pretty close to your subject. Again, because it's a wide, it's not going to give you too much background blur, but if you get very close to your subject, it will give you a blurry background, and the quality of that blur is very nice indeed. It renders colours absolutely beautifully, and it's a very contrasty lens, and you'll find a good one of these for anywhere between £50 to £70 or thereabouts. So while it's not the cheapest 35mm vintage prime, it is a very, very nice one, and for me this lens is definitely a keeper. Here's another 35mm vintage prime. This is the Carl Zeiss Jena 35mm Flektogon f2.4, and I think of all my vintage lenses, this, with the possible exception of the Helios 44, is the one I've used the most. This is an absolutely stunning lens. It's very well made and constructed to a very high standard. It's all metal, and like all the Zeiss Jena lenses, this one has stood the test of time really well. The aperture ring is at the back, and apertures run from f22 to f2.4, and one of the nice things about this lens is that it has partial stops. So between f2.4 and f4 there are 3 clicks. Between f4 and f5.6 there are 2 clicks, and so on. The focus ring is at the front, and it has a knurled finish, so you can find it very easily if you're looking through the viewfinder. It does have quite a long throw. That's about 3/4 of a circle, but that long throw means you can get some very fine adjustments in focusing. It has the widest aperture range of any of these lenses, but perhaps the greatest strength of this lens is its minimum focus distance. It will focus down to 20 centimeters, possibly even a little beyond that, so you can get very close indeed to your subject. If you're shooting on APS-C, that equates to about 15 centimeters, and if you're shooting this lens on micro four thirds, it will get down to an effective 10 centimeters. So you really can do some very effective close-up work with this lens. The quality of the background blur this lens will give you is just delicious. It's so smooth and creamy. It's absolutely lovely. It's a great lens for product photography. I've used it quite extensively for eBay ads, and because you can get so close to your subject, product shots will always have a very, very nice defocused blurry background, even if you need to stop down a little bit. This is one of the nicest lenses I've ever used, and its quality of construction is easily equal to the Zuiko lenses. It's not far off Leica standards either. What it doesn't have though is the compactness of the Zuiko lenses. This is actually quite a large lens, and when you mount it on a mirrorless body, the adapter is about an inch and a half or so long. It does add up to a reasonably bulky outfit. Having said that though, it's not so large that it throws the camera out of balance, and I've never really had a problem with the size. In pixel peeping tests, it's not quite so sharp as the Zuiko 35, but the difference is so small that for all practical purposes you're never going to notice it. It renders colours beautifully, and it's very contrasty too. Now, because this is such a nice lens, that unfortunately is reflected in the price. The days when you could pick up one of these for £20 or £30 are unfortunately long gone, and a good copy of this lens will cost anywhere between £150 and £200. In my view, however, it's definitely worth that. This is a very, very capable lens. It has very, very nice optics, and it's very well engineered as well. Definitely one of my all-time favourites. So there we are, 4 wide-angle primes that you can buy today and use on your mirrorless body. All of them have a unique character and charm, and all of them will give you some really outstanding images. I've really enjoyed using these lenses, and I hope you do too. So until next time, that's it from me for now. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope you've found it useful. Please do like and subscribe, and I will see you next time for more Zenography. Thanks for watching.